So this is a sliding scale here. You want to go back one more? And if she pulls it up a little bit, you will see for Division 2 sliding scale. So the higher your grade point average, the lower your SAT score could be. The higher the SAT score, the lower the grade point average or the ACT sum score. So that's how they work on that scale. So if you have, you know, a 3.5 GPA, your SAT could be as low as 430, right? Which most people are not scoring a 430 on a SAT. That's like just registering for the course, hopefully, right? But that's what the scale looks like. And this is done because there's an understanding that some students don't perform well on these types of tests. So you might be a really good student, but you don't test well in standardized tests. So that's why the scale is there, to allow the flexibility so that you don't eliminate students from opportunities just because they don't test well on standardized tests. All right, Dr. Scott, this one is you.
So one of the things we realize is, as Kendall is saying, the two systems are very different. In Trinidad, you can finish, or in the Caribbean, you can finish your CSEC and get a full hand of passes and say, oh, I've had enough of this thing called school, I'm ready to roll. One of the things we want to say, though, is you have to consider some of the other hidden factors. In the US, school goes all the way until 18. They don't get out at 10. That would be a dropout. They don't get out at 11. That's a dropout. You have to go all the way to the 12th grade. So students in the US, when they graduate from high school, they are 18. If you decide you're in the Caribbean and you have had enough, you have extraordinary CSEC passes and you are a great player, let's say you're a student athlete, you are ready to roll. The thing we say to parents, caregivers, sponsors, and of course the student athlete is you have to also think in terms of your academic maturity. You have been studying and you have made it through to the CSEC, you have done well, but there's a growth that occurs in the last 2 years. If you had done lower 6 or if you had gone off and done something else, in the US, they will continue to be growing. So if you come at 16, everybody that you meet on campus will in fact be 2 years older than you. They will be 2 years older by in age chronologically, with their maturity, their social maturity, their level of independence. And so those are the things that we have listed here. If you decide that you are so good and you really have talent and you want to go, at 16, you have to give some thought to your academic maturity, your athletic maturity, the level of independence and personal management skills. It's not like in the Caribbean where somebody will wake you or you can hear the sounds of movement and so on in your neighborhood and you know it's time to get up. No, in the US, when you come to college, you are on your own. There's nobody coming to wake you up, nobody coming to remind you where you have to be, when you have to be there. Particularly with athletes, when they say they are going on a trip and the bus is leaving at 6, they don't mean the bus is going to pull off at 6:05. They mean at 6, the bus's wheels are moving. So if you roll up there at 5:55, you will be watching the back of the bus as it gets ready to move. So those are the kinds of things you have to think about. And then of course, there's the whole notion of time management skills, because here, the college experience is pretty much 24 hours your time. You can go to class or not. If you're a student athlete, you have to go to the practices. But adhering to the requirements for class attendance, there are none. You just have to do the work. And so if you are not skilled at managing your time all of the time, it's a culture shock, it's a time management shock. And the end result sometimes for students is that first semester is a nightmare because you weren't really prepared. So we're not saying don't come. We're not saying don't leave early. We are simply saying give some thought to how you will bridge that gap, intellectually, personal maturity, etc. Sixth form may be an option. There may be other programs that you can do for a year, or you may get a job or an apprenticeship, something that allows you to continue maturing so that when you get here, if you decide to come, you're not that far behind age-wise and academic maturity-wise. So when we talk about the school search, we like to say, the first place to start is preparation. You have to know the types of schools, what are your interests. There are lots of choices. There are somewhere between 2,500 to 3,000 schools in the US. So that's a whole lot of choosing. And then once you have begun to look, you actually have to have some process by which you evaluate and refine your search. This would be Kendall.
Okay, so your first consideration, obviously, you're a student or student athlete. You want to make sure that you are doing an academic consideration. Do you have an idea of what you want to pursue academically? This will sort of start the guiding process for you in terms of selecting a school. Now, you see in the column, it says student, parents, and coach, because when we do this here, we want to involve, I was on another call this morning, we talked about the magic triangle, right? The student, the parent, and the coach are involved in this process. It's not just about your ability to play or perform, but you're going for your purpose is academic, so that's it. The field of study. Some fields of study are very broad, some are very narrow, and some may not be as easily accessible or available. So you want to understand what your field of study is, and or how do you get to certain fields, because there's not a direct pathway to some of them. I will use actuarial science, for example. On the undergraduate level, you can hardly find an undergraduate degree in actuarial science, but it's a graduate level program. But what undergraduate program would you be looking for your particular career field that would lead you to actuarial science? Again, preferences in terms of research institutions or an institution that's committed to undergraduate studies. There's a difference. A research institute is focused on their primary professors, their tenured professors, doing research, writing books, writing papers, because there's a lot of funding that goes along with that with the institutions and the departments. And then you have institutions that are geared towards undergraduate study, really what we call teaching institutions that teach you in-depthly in your subject matter, okay? Whether there's innovative programs or traditional structured programs, since the unfortunate advent of COVID, a lot of programs have had to go online, and you have blended courses that are being offered now. So some of your courses could be online, and some in the classroom. So you may have a mix of those as well. The size of the college is important, you know. So there are institutions here that have 65,000 students. And it's easy to just be a number. It's easy to just get lost within an institution. So understanding what the different would present to you in terms of classroom and student to teacher ratios, all of those things make a difference in terms of how you're going to be successful. And then, of course, the larger the school, the tendency is there are more activities. So if you're looking for a broad range of activities, then you're looking for a larger size school, medium to large size school.
So, so Kendall has given you some of the basic things to think about in terms of how are we looking at these schools. The next part of that process then is to separate the schools into groups. Here we use three categories. There's the reach, which is like a stretch. There's a match, which is probably best suited to your credentials. And then there's the safe school, where just about anybody and everybody can get in. We usually recommend at least 3 in each category. You never know what can happen. Based on your credentials, you may get into a reach school. Getting in is the first part. Paying for it is the second part. But that's no reason to not apply, to not take a shot. As they say, you haven't got a ticket, you haven't got a chance. If you don't apply, you don't give yourself a chance. So a reach school then is a school where the academic qualifications yours are below the average. So if, let's say, the school is looking for an SAT score of 560, 570, 580, and yours is 3 something, okay, that's a huge reach. Or let's say the school is looking for students with a GPA of 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, and yours is a 3.1. That would be a reach. Another characteristic of a reach school is that it's highly selective. And so their acceptance rate is usually in the single digits. Brown, Harvard, Yale, 3.57%. Your chances of getting in there are slim. Doesn't mean you can't try if you don't have the rest of the credentials, but it's good to know what you're looking at so that you can decide, okay, not wasting my time here, I'll look somewhere else. Your reach schools, like the Brown, Harvard, Yales, tend to be, they may be need blind. And what that means is they're not looking at your financial situation. They are just looking at your credentials, your profile, your stats. And once they say, yep, this is the person we want, then they look to see what kind of need you have. A fully need blind school, wonderful, because they may be generous. Some schools will tell you they are need blind, but when they offer you financial package, much of it is loans. So those are the places where you need to be careful. After the reach school, then that's the one where you stretch, is the match. A match school is the one where your academic qualifications are smack dab in the middle of what they usually take in their student population. Sometimes they are highly selective, and by highly selective, we mean 55+%. So 55, 60% of the applicants get in. That's still pretty selective. There's no guarantee of acceptance, even when you have good credentials. They may have merit-based scholarships, and those will either be based on grades or some of the criteria or characteristics that they are looking for. Often there will be competitive scholarships also available. So again, when you are doing your research, you're looking at a variety of things. I would say in my process, I looked at several schools 2 or 3 times. First time around was for one set of features. The second time around was for a different set of features. It's a lot of schools, a lot of things to think about. You're not gonna discern it all on the first run. So some schools will have merit-based, and you wanna know how generous they are. If they're not generous enough, keep walking. You might find somebody else who's more generous. And then, as I said, competitive scholarships. Some schools are meets need, and that's where it says, where you have to find out through additional research, does that meet need come in the form of, here, gift, free money, you don't have to repay it. That's what I'm talking about. Or is that, here, loans, and more loans. That's not what I'm talking about. You don't want to be burdened with a whole lot of loans. So if you're looking and your credentials match, now we want to know what kind of money are you all talking. And then the last group of schools would be the safety schools. That's the schools, the band of schools where your academic qualifications are above everybody's. Their student population is well below yours. What does that look like? That looks like a school where they say they are looking for students who have an SAT of 450, and you have a solid 510, 525. Woo, that's a safety school because you've already exceeded their stats. They tend to be low selectivity, which simply means they're not picky and choosy. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong. Some really good schools have low selectivity. All it means is anybody can apply. Anybody can be chosen to get in. Doesn't mean everybody will be successful once they get in. So don't let the selectivity rate fool you. Some schools have 60, 70%. So in the area where I am, I'm in Maryland, Morgan State University has a 75, 80% acceptance rate, but everybody doesn't graduate. Everybody can get in, but everybody doesn't graduate. So don't let the selectivity rate fool you. And then at the end of the, to round out the consideration with the safety schools, they really may or may not be generous. Sometimes they simply cannot afford. Sometimes they are state schools, not with a lot of money, or there may be smaller schools that don't have a lot of money. So if funding is what you need, you may be a match, and it may be a great pick in terms of program, your stats, but then you have to look for all of the money. So there are some things that you need to balance. Mr. Riz.
Yes, ma'am. So in our school selection, there are a number of different things, again, that we want to talk about. Obviously, we're starting to narrow down, so we're looking at academic interests. The location of the school is important. You know, we're coming out of the Caribbean, so where a school is located becomes important. Do you have family nearby? Do you have other people that are attending the school? Is there a community of Trinidadians or West Indians around, a support system that you may need in those environments? You know, from the picture frame, we have an urban campus at the top, and then we have that picture in the middle with the circle is a snow-covered campus. So you have some weather considerations to take in there. And then the one on the bottom is a rural campus. It's like in the middle of nowhere. When you get out there, how are you going to get around? You know, how many trains, buses, and planes do you need to take to get there? You know, so the location's important. We talked about the size of the school, but also the student body size, you know. What is the average class size in terms of student-teacher ratio? Those are really important as well, too. Some institutions, you could be in a class with 300 students very easily, you know, or you could be in a class with 12 students. So those things make a difference in terms of how you're going to, you know, access your academic experience. I have here the soccer program, but for all athletes, you want to investigate the program. You know, how is the program comprised? Where do the majority of the players come from? Schools, you might go and search a program and see, okay, the school is in Ohio and all the players on the roster from Ohio. That kind of gives you a tip that it's 9 out of 10 times that coach is not recruiting from Ohio. So having that conversation with that coach might not prove to be as fruitful as opposed to looking at another school where you see a diverse roster of players. They come from lots of different places, including international. And then that gives you a clue that a coach may be interested in an international player. Then the other thing would be availability of opportunity. It might be the year that you're a goalkeeper and the school doesn't need a goalkeeper. So you could be interested in a program all you want. The coach is going to say, I don't need a goalkeeper this year. And so you'd have to look for another option. So again, by doing a roster search, will kind of give you an idea. You would know the classification of each player on the team. And you can see that this year, the coach is only going to be losing, you know, 5 players, but he's still got 3 goalkeepers returning. Now, you might be better than all of them, but does that mean that the coach is going to want to bring a 4th goalkeeper into this program from overseas on scholarship? That's a whole process that may or may not work for you based on availability of opportunity, availability of scholarship. Some years there's no scholarship available. Sometimes the time you start your process, if you start too late, there's no scholarship available. So whether there's scholarship available, and then some schools might say, okay, if you come for the first year as a walk-on, we don't have a scholarship for you now, but you could come. We believe you'll fit into the program, and next year or next semester, we'll be able to give you some scholarship money. So you might come on academic money only, and then earn a soccer scholarship later on. You know, so there are a number of students who have to go that route as well. So for the student and the parent, these are conversations you need to be having. The range of courses or specialized training, are graduate students acceptable as instructors in lower level courses? A lot of institutions have undergraduate courses that are not taught by the professor listed on the course syllabus. They have a graduate assistant who's working for the professor while the professor is doing research. The graduate assistant is actually teaching the class. Is that acceptable? And then obviously there's some recognizable names of institutions, what we call the big name or nationally recognized institutions. Is that what you're interested in? And if you choose some of those, they may not meet your criteria. They may be out of your reach. They may not necessarily be the school that is the best fit for you. I guess that's the thing that we need in this conversation to understand. There's a fit out there, and that's why you go through this process looking for the right fit. For the student athletes, a little bit different. Sometimes we're thinking about, if I could just get a scholarship somewhere I'm going, and you can negate some of these things. But I see a lot of times students go into one situation and it's not the right fit, and now they're looking for a transfer. You calling Roy and you're calling me and say, hey coach, this is not going well, or I don't like it here, or something's not happening, I want to transfer to somewhere else. So all these things are really important as we go through the conversations between the parent and the student, because you want to try to get it as close to right as possible coming out of the gate. It makes life a whole lot easier if you can get it as close to right as possible.